Hi, I'd like to ask you a question today. Have you ever really considered just who Jesus is? Many of us today are totally unaware of the person and the character of Jesus. We're taught very little or nothing about him at school. Maybe our parents knew very little about him. And sadly, maybe the public face of the church these days, what we see on television, in newspapers, magazines, social media, maybe has given us a very poor reflection or even a misleading view of Jesus. The picture we often see is of a Western white man with auburn hair and beard, nicely trimmed, dressed in clean white robes, with a halo maybe around his head, and a compassionate but sadly sometimes soppy look on his face. The truth would be very different. A Middle Eastern man, with dark hair and a dark complexion, who for the first 30 years of his life worked in manual labour with his father, in a tough world, a poor village, in an occupied country. He wouldn't really look anything like what we portray him today. But not only do we often have his looks wrong, we often get his whole character and his purpose for being here wrong. At 30 years of age, Jesus started out on a ministry to people. He travelled all over the land, all over his country, speaking to people from every walk of life, from every class, the rich, the poor, the powerful, the homeless, the upper classes, the underclasses, the popular and the despised, the religious people, and even the downright criminal element. Some of the things he said were absolutely incredible. He was the greatest orator in the history of the world. His claims about himself and what he had the power to do, well, they were life-changing. Quite incredible for a man who was born in poverty and without any formal education whatsoever. He said things like, "I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I have come to seek and to save that which was lost." In this very short series of talks about the words and the claims of Jesus, we want to bring you a clearer picture of his purpose, of his great love, of his life-changing power for those who would believe in him. And we'd like you to put aside all the myth, all the pictures you've seen, all the misleading statements you might have heard, and just consider for yourself, once and for all if you like, who is Jesus? And based only on what he said and what he did, is he relevant? Even though it's 2,000 years ago, is he relevant to my life? Today I want to talk about something that he said at a very special time for the Jewish people. We read in the Bible in John chapter 7 that there was a feast every year called the Feast of Tabernacles. It was very much like a harvest festival, but it was very important to the people. They could bring the harvest in, they could thank God for his bountiful provision. And for a full week, every day there'd be a procession. And every day the priest would carry a golden pitcher of water, a big jug, from the pool of Siloam up to the temple, and they would pour it out as an offering to God. And the people would always shout in a loud voice and recite from the prophet Isaiah, "With joy will you draw water from the wells of salvation." The whole dramatic ceremony was a vivid thanksgiving, a vivid thanksgiving of God's good gift of water, and a memory of the time when God had made water appear miraculously from a rock, when they travelled through the wilderness. Now Jesus was never frightened to upset or challenge or correct the religious leaders of his day. And so against this backdrop of this really important time, and on the very last day, the culmination of the feast, Jesus stands up and in a loud voice he says, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." It's as if Jesus was saying, look, you're thanking God and you're glorifying God for the water that quenches the thirst of your bodies. But come to me if you want water that'll quench the very thirst of your soul. He said, the person who comes to me, I'll give them living water. This is a very startling claim and probably very confusing as well. And it really upset the religious leaders. to the extent that they wanted him dead, because they knew he was claiming to be more than just a man. Jesus was saying, I can do more for you than just meet physical needs. He wasn't talking about giving us ordinary water. They've had plenty of that. He was talking about something eternal. He was saying he could fill the deep thirst inside every human being. You know, every one of us is a searcher of some kind. Every one of us has experienced times in our life where we just not quite satisfied. We search for love, for power, for riches, for pleasure, for possessions. We think that these are the things that will satisfy us, and they are things that do satisfy cravings and satisfy us for a time, if you like. Maybe you've tried them all. Ultimately, we tend to be left with just wanting something more, something we can't quite put our finger on, but we're still thirsty. Jesus said, come to me and you'll never thirst again. What a bold claim. To make this claim, surely he had to be mad, or maybe he had to be God himself, who he claimed to be. See, when we strip away all of the ceremony, all the traditions, all the things that aren't Christianity, this is what we're left with. Jesus' claim that he's God himself, come to earth, and that our thirst, our insatiable desire to be filled with something is a result of us being separated from God. He said he came to seek and to save that which was lost. By his death, by his resurrection, he brought us away to have peace with God, to be restored to God, to be not lost anymore. And that's where the search ends. That's where the thirst is quenched, to know God through his Son, Jesus Christ. We live in unusual times. The measures being taken to combat the coronavirus, they're having an effect on people's lives. They're having an effect on people's health. We're being restrained from doing the things that we normally do. Maybe it's a good time to reflect. Maybe it's a good time to just to stop and take stock of our lives. I'm reminded of the words of a song from maybe 40 years ago that still seem very relevant today. These are the words. Rushing towards oblivion like lemmings to the sea. We struggle through this lifetime and call it being free. But knowing where you're going and who you're meant to be, that's what freedom means to me. We're all born with a hunger that we just can't seem to feed. And all the things we struggle for, they're not the things we need. But the one who seeks the Lord of life will find his life indeed. Satisfaction guaranteed. There you go. You might think this is all crazy, or it might just strike a chord of truth with you. And if it does, please can I encourage you to look further, to search further. Maybe you could watch another one of these videos. Perhaps you'd like to watch one of our streamed live services on a Sunday morning. Or even come along to church once church is open again after lockdown and find out some more. Or maybe you just want to drop us a question or receive some further information to read yourself. We'd be happy to do any of those things. It's the most important search of all. So on the page coming up with some contact information. Please, we'd love to hear from you. And for now, just thanks for listening. Thank you.